Jake here for Extreme Terrain, and in this video we're taking a look at the Barricade HD plate style full width rear bumper with LED fog lights fitting 2021 and newer Broncos, excluding the Raptor. If you're looking to add some aggressive style and enhance your Bronco's off-road ability in one easy package, this is going to be right up your alley. The Barricade HD accentuates your Bronco style and makes it look much better while also being more capable to boot. This is a full width bumper that's going to add some additional capability to your rig. Now on the sides here, it's going to cut up a lot closer to the body of the Bronco than your factory unit does, and it gives you a bit of a better departure angle than stock as well. Overall, I think it's a pretty rugged look, and it gives the Bronco a bit more of an aggressive flair than the factory setup too. Now this one also has some additional benefits, one of which is the LED cube lights that mount in these preset cutouts in the bumper. So you get some extra lighting out on the trail. Now there is a version of this bumper that is sold without the lights if you already have a set, or if you just want to save a few bucks on your initial purchase. So if that's more your speed, you can check that out on our site as well. Now outside of those lights, there are a few other things that we want to touch on as well. On the outer edges, you'll find some shackles that are going to help you out of any sticky situation. So if you want to have D-rings on there, or if you just want to have something with a little peace of mind for recovery points, you've got them included as well. And as you can see, this also features a large cutout in the center for your spare tire. So even if you've upsized your wheels and tires and you want to have a matching spare on the back, you've got some room here. Now this kit also includes a license plate relocation bracket that is going to work with your rear view camera and your spare tire mount. So it's going to stay out of the way, it's going to mount above the camera in the center, and you've got provisions for the light here as well. But perhaps most importantly, this bumper also has provisions for your rear parking sensors. Right here, 2 on the outside here and 2 on the other side to match. So it's going to keep that system fully functional, meaning that all of the functionality of your Bronco is going to be intact, but you get those good looks and some extra protection as well. Now this was also designed to be a bolt-on installation, so you don't need to modify your rig to get it fitted either. This thing is branded as heavy duty, and that's done with good reason. It's constructed from 3mm thick steel, so it's heavy, but it's also tough. It gets a 2-stage finish as well, starting with an epoxy pre-coating, and that is topped off with this textured black powder coat that you see before you. So it's going to stand up to the elements, and it's going to provide you a lot of solid protection from the bumps and bruises in daily life and out on the trail, and it's going to look good too. This also pairs well with any of the different HD front bumpers that Barricade offers, so if you're looking for a matched set, we've got you covered there as well. The lights are also worth mentioning because these are pretty stout little things. They feature an aluminum housing with built-in heat sinks in the back, and you get polycarbonate lenses up front, so these can take a beating. Now the LEDs inside, you have 6 of them in fact, put out a really bright 6000K temperature light. So it's going to be plenty of output, it's going to be a really nice bright white. Now the whole thing comes pre-wired too, and you get the harness that you need included in the kit. And these lights are IP67 waterproof rated, so even if you're out playing in the mud or the river, they're going to keep shining nice and bright. Pricing for this setup comes in at about $750, making it one of the more affordable full width rear bumpers in the segment. And you are getting a lot here. For a bolt-on bumper that includes lighting, this is a pretty good deal, and you've got everything you need to get this job done. Speaking of which, installation is going to get a 1 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, and you should expect this to take you about 2 hours to complete. Now you are going to need to run some of the included wiring for your fog lights and for the light on your license plate relocation kit, but everything comes pre-wired and ready to go, so that's a pretty simple task too. And like I mentioned earlier, this thing is designed to bolt right on. Now you are going to want to have a friend on hand to help you out with this though, as even smaller bumpers like these tend to have a lot of heft to them. It can be tricky to get them into place and get those bolts started, so having another set of hands around is going to make it a little bit safer and a little bit easier for you. With that though, let's head out to the shop and we'll walk you through the installation process.
The tools you'll need for this project are an impact gun, a 1/2-inch drive ratchet, a 1/4-inch drive ratchet, a 21, an 18, a 16, and a 13mm socket, a 10mm 1/4-inch drive socket, a pair of side cutters, a 5mm Allen wrench, a trim removal tool, and you'll also need to source some zip ties and some cable management tools. Hi everyone, today we're installing a rear bumper on our Bronco, so let's get started with the uninstall of the stock bumper. All right, first thing we need to do before we take our bumper off is we've got a couple electrical connectors that need to be disconnected. We've got one on the driver's side, one on the passenger side. They're both in the same location. They're just inside the rear fender well here, right in front of the rear bumper. And I'll show you where they're at as best as we can, given the space that we have, and then we can go ahead and get them disconnected. All right, so our first connector is right here. If you pull that out a little bit, you can actually see the wiring harness. So it's, like I said, it's right in front of the rear bumper, just inside the wheel well here. So we're actually going to get at it from underneath and go ahead and get that disconnected. All right, so the connector, like I said, is right here. All you've got to do is reach up to the top, press in on the black release handle, and pull it out. And now you can go ahead and disconnect the connector on the passenger side. Now we've got 3 bolts that have to be removed on each side. We've got 2 that hold our bumper and our tow hook in, and then there's another one right underneath this body mount here in the back, and it's right here on the side. So we're going to use our 13mm socket to get this one here out underneath the body mount. And now we'll use our 18mm socket to get the ones here holding in the tow hook. Now you want to make sure you support the tow hook while you're getting this second bolt out so it doesn't fall down. All right, now there's a little plastic clip in the center of that. You can just pull that out and the tow hook comes off. Now you can repeat that process for the other side of the bumper as well. Just remember that when you do, you will need to support the bumper somehow when you take those other 3 bolts out, because there will be nothing holding it onto the vehicle then. Now once you've got all of your bolts removed, you can go ahead and lift your bumper up and pull it out. Now if your Bronco is like ours that has the rear parking sensors installed in it, we are going to need to transfer those over to our new bumper. We're also going to need to transfer over our license plate light from the old bumper to the new one. So to make things a little bit easier for you, what we're going to do is remove this plate here. We've got 5 bolts. We'll be using our 13mm socket to be able to take those out. And then we've also got to push out all of these retaining clips here throughout the system so that we can actually remove the wiring harness. So we're just going to use a flathead screwdriver to push out those retaining clips, and then we'll go ahead and remove this plate so that we can get the license plate and the harness out. All right, so to remove the retaining clips, what we're going to do is take our flathead screwdriver, just put it on the outside of it here, give it a little pop, and it should go right out. All right, now we'll get the clips on the rest of the bumper here. Get this last bracket and one on the end. Now we'll get the ones on the other end. All right, now we get these 2 clips in the middle of this plate. Knock those out as well. Now we can remove our 5 bolts here for this center plate using our 13mm socket. Lift that plate out of the way. All right, now we're going to disconnect our license plate light connector here so that we can push our license plate light out to the outside of the bumper. Now there are 2 clips, one on each end of the license plate light here. Now you have to be careful when you squeeze these together to unlock it and push it out. They are fragile and will break, such as ours is right now. But to do this, we're going to disconnect the connector right here by simply pushing in on the release lever and pulling away. Now once you've got that done, you would go ahead and squeeze the clips on the end to push them in and unlock it, and then just push your license plate light out. Next thing we're going to do is remove our parking sensors. And to do this, what you're going to do is got two ears on the side here. You're just going to spread those out a little bit to unlock the parking sensor and then slide it right out. Now you can do that for the other 3 sensors as well. Now that we've got our parking sensors disconnected from the bumper, we can go ahead and pull our harness back through these other brackets and pull it out right through the center. Now the only thing you have to be careful of here is making sure that you keep track of which side of the bumper the sensors are on, because we need them to go back in the same position. So we've got a piece of tape on here that's marked with a blue stripe. We know that this is going to be on the driver's side. So when we put it into the new bumper, we'll make sure that this side goes in on the driver's side. So now we just grab a hold of our harness and just kind of feed it through, pulling it gently and working it out. And once you've got one side done, just go ahead and do the same thing for the other side. And now your parking sensor harness has been disconnected. All right, a couple things we want to cover before we actually get to the install of the bumper. One is, if by chance you do not have the parking sensors on your vehicle, you can use these supplied rubber plugs to go into the holes where the parking sensors would go. Now they're really simple to install. All you've got to do is put them on the front of the outside of the bumper, push it in until it snaps, and you're done. And you've got 4 of them to do, so it's really simple to take care of. Now the other thing is, if you are not installing lights in your bumper, the kit does come with these mesh panels to install. Now they supply you with the bolts and the nuts as well. So basically all you're going to do is put this on the back side of the bumper, put the bolt through the front side, put on a flat washer and one of the nylon nuts that goes with it. Put all 4 of those in for each panel and you're good to go. Now, since we are putting lights in ours and we do have parking sensors, let's get to that phase next. All right, so now as you can see, we've flipped our bumper over and we've got our wiring harness for our parking sensors laid out on the table here. First thing you're going to need to do is remove the silicone ring that goes around the parking sensor from the OEM model. And to do that, all you have to do is grab a hold of it and just peel it away. Now you do that for all 4 sensors and you're good to go. Next thing you're going to do is install this foam washer seal where we just took off the silicone from. My suggestion is remove the backing material and then stick it onto the parking sensor like so. Now we're not going to do that because we're not going to put this on as a permanent addition to our vehicle. But we will show you how to actually put it in. As you can see, it's really simple. Once you've got the backing material removed, just slide it over the end of the parking sensor. Then what you're going to do is you're going to install this inside the parking sensor bracket. Then we've got another foam seal, it's half moon if you will, and it's got backing material as well. Take that backing material off, attach it to the back side of the parking sensor, and you can tell there's a flat side and a round side, and it matches up well with the parking sensor itself. Go ahead and attach that to it. Once you've got that on, then we can go ahead and install our plastic retaining ring. And again, it's got a round side and a flat side. So you put the round side up against where the flat side or the round side of the sensor is and snap it into place. Now with these 2 seals and the snap ring, it will hold everything in there exactly the way that it should. So let's go ahead and get this installed. Now if you had the backing material removed, like I said, just attach it to the back of the sensor, take your retaining ring, slide it over the 2 ears bracket, push it in until it locks into place. Once you've got that done, you can repeat that process for the other 3 sensors. All right, now that we've got our parking sensors installed, we're going to want to secure our wiring harness to the back of the bumper just to keep it from getting any damage or interference with anything later on down the road. So you will have to source from your local hardware store or electronics store these cable management ties. And all they are is a piece of plastic with some slots drilled into them that you can fit a zip tie through, and then some double-sided tape on the back side to go ahead and hold it to the bumper. So what we're going to do is we've kind of got our harness laid out where we want it to be once we get this done. So you just peel off the backing of the hold down, place it on the bumper where you want to secure your cables to, and then go ahead and use a small zip tie, run it through the bottom of the hold down, around the harness, and pull it tight. And we'll show you one more. Now you do also want to be careful where you put these, because once they're attached, they're attached. It doesn't want to come off. So we'll go ahead and put this on this side, run our zip tie through, and pull it down tight. Now we're going to put a couple more in here on the sides just to make sure that everything is out of the way. But you get the idea now. Once you've got them all attached, you can go ahead and use a pair of snips and just cut off the excess from the wire tie. All right, now our kit does come with a pair of lights to go in the rear of our bumper so that you can light things up when you're going in reverse. So to install these, we're going to install these from the outside of the bumper. So we're going to go ahead and slide these through the hole and then attach them with the supplied bolts, washers, and nuts. So let's go ahead and get this done. So we're going to slide our light in from the front of the bumper, or the back of it as you would look at it. I usually like to keep the harness itself towards the bottom of the bumper, and then using the supplied bolts, feed that through the front, attach a flat washer and a lock washer, and then one of the supplied nuts. Do that for the other 3 bolts in the light. All right, now you'll need a 5mm Allen wrench and a 10mm socket to go ahead and tighten these down. All right, now you can repeat that process for the other light. All right, now we're ready to install our filler panels on the ends of the bumpers. Now they are side specific, so you want to make sure that this angled edge is on the inside of the bumper, not the outside. You're also going to be using these 3 bolts per filler panel that already have your lock washer and your flat washers attached. They're included in the kit. So let's go ahead and get that installed. So we're just going to lay this up and line up our holes, insert the bolt from behind, do the one down at the bottom just to hold it in place, and now we'll get the one in the middle. Now once you've got them started, go ahead and make sure that everything's lined up the way you want it. There is a little bit of wiggle room here, and then using the supplied 4mm Allen wrench, go ahead and tighten those up. Now once you've got one side secured, you can do the same process for the other side. All right, now as you can see, we've got both of our lights installed, we've got both of our filler panels installed. Now we're ready to install it on the vehicle, so let's get that done. Now we're ready to install our bumper, and to do that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna install these brackets that come with the kit. We've got one for the driver's side, one for the passenger side, and they are marked with D and P for driver and passenger. So make sure that you've got the correct one for the side that you're working on. And this just goes inside the frame rail here between the two welded nuts at the bottom of the frame rail. And these two holes on the side will line up with two holes in the frame rail. We'll just set that in place. And now do the same thing for the passenger side. All right, now we're ready to lift the bumper up. So now would be a very good time to get an extra pair of hands to help you lift it because it is kind of heavy. So we'll go ahead and lift this up, we'll set it in place, and then we'll attach one of the side bolts to at least hold it in while we finish up the rest of it. All right, now that we've got the sides secured, we can go ahead and install the rest of the bolts. All right, now we go ahead and reinstall our tow hook using the supplied M12 bolts. So we'll slide one into the front of the tow hook. And then do the other bolt. All right, now once you've got them started, you can go ahead and do the same thing for the other side, and then we'll line everything up and tighten it down. All right, now that we've got all of our bolts installed, we've checked our alignment, made sure that it's where it needs to be, we can go ahead and tighten them up for good. So we're going to tackle the two on the outside of the frame rail first, using our 16mm socket. We'll go ahead and tighten those up. Now we'll get the two on the bottom where our tow hook is at, using our 18mm socket. And now you can do the same thing on the passenger side. Next thing we're going to do is install our license plate relocation bracket. And that's going to be mounted right up here on these two studs on your spare tire carrier. So we're going to remove those nuts and install the new ones that come with the kit, and then install our bracket. So we'll go ahead and remove these two lug nuts up here. Now we'll replace them with these two special lug nuts included in the kit. So they'll screw right onto the studs there, and then we've got openings on the other end for a couple of bolts. Now we'll tighten them down with an 18mm socket. Now we'll go ahead and place our bracket over our studs and insert the two M12 bolts with the flat washer and a lock washer as well. And we'll tighten those down with our 18mm socket. Now we'll go ahead and insert our license plate light that we took off of the OEM bumper and snap that into place here. And now we can run our wiring harness. All right, now we're going to take our long wiring harness that's included in the kit, and we're going to run it down to the bumper and reconnect it to the OEM harness for our license plate light, and then run it up to our relocation bracket. So we're going to take one end, feed it down behind the bumper, and then go ahead and connect it to the OEM harness. All right, so here's our OEM plug. Here's our wiring harness. We're just going to plug those two together. So plug those in until they snap into place. All right, now we're going to go ahead and remove these two plastic panels on the rear door, and they simply just pop out like so. Same thing for the rear one. All right, now we're going to go ahead and run our wiring harness for our relocation kit behind this bracket here for this strut, run it up to the wiring harness from the factory and across into the back of the door. Now, once we've got some of the harness pulled through, what we're going to do is we're going to zip tie it to this OEM harness here, all the way across and into the back of the door. So for right now, we're not going to tighten up our zip tie. We're just going to put it in place to hold it up. And then we're going to run it along here, inside the back of the door, and over here. All right, now right inside this opening here, there is a plastic fitting with a rubber grommet that has a wiring harness that goes through it. And what we're going to do is, on your vehicle, what you would need to do is cut a hole in this rubber grommet here to feed this end of the harness through. And then once you've got that done and you've got everything hooked up, then of course you'll need to reseal that grommet somehow, either with some silicone or some liquid rubber, something like that. Now, because we're not making this a permanent addition to our vehicle, we're not actually going to do that. We're just going to push the grommet out of the way so that we can feed the wire through and get it hooked up to the license plate light. And once you've got your harness pulled through, we're going to feed it through our spare tire right behind our license plate light. And then we can go ahead and plug it in. Now you'll notice on this wiring harness here, there is a gray tab at the top. That is going to lock it in once we get it attached to the light. So we'll go ahead and hook that up. We'll plug that in. Once it locks into place, go ahead and depress that gray tab, and now it's locked in for sure. All right, now that we've got everything hooked up, we can go ahead and finalize the length of what we need for our wiring harness and zip tie it all in. So we'll go ahead and pull this up, tighten up the zip tie, go ahead and attach a few more. And then once you've got it secured, we'll go ahead and cut off the excess. Now, once we've got everything secured, we go ahead and replace our panels. And now you can go ahead and zip tie up the bottom of that harness behind the bumper there. And you can just zip tie it to the OEM harness. Now we're ready to run the wiring for our lights in the bumper. And the wiring harness includes two plugs that'll plug directly into the lights, an on-off switch to attach to your dash. It also comes with its own wired-in relay, an inline fuse, and a power and a ground wire. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this from the engine compartment, and what we can do is just hook up the power and ground to the battery, and then we'll run the on and off switch through a grommet in the firewall here. We'll get to that at the very end. And then we'll feed these plugs down through the firewall, along the rail, and we'll zip tie them to the existing wiring harness that's already in the vehicle. And we'll just run this all the way back until they get plugged into the bumper. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So to feed these wires through, what we're going to do is we're going to go down behind the power brake booster here and just run this all the way down to the bottom and then pull the wires through, leaving enough room, of course, to be able to attach our power and ground to the battery. So we'll just feed these down through right behind the power brake booster, like I said. And it's also a good idea to either zip tie or put some sort of a wire wrap around both of the plugs at the same time so you can feed them through in one motion. And once you get these mostly fed through, we can go ahead and go down underneath and start pulling the wires through. All right, so as you can see, we've got our plugs here pulled down through the engine compartment. So now we'll just go ahead and finish pulling them down through. And you'll be able to see the factory wiring harness that goes along the frame rail just inside the body. We'll zip tie this to the factory harness, and just run it all the way back till we get to the bumper itself. Now here's the wiring harness that we were talking about from the factory, and it runs right along the side rail here. So we're just going to run a zip tie through here and zip tie that to the existing harness. And then once you've got it zip tied, you can go ahead and use a pair of side cutters, cut off the excess, and then just continue working yourself all the way back till you get to the back where the bumper is at. All right, and we'll run one more in here. Now you might want to run these about every 12 inches or so, just to make sure that there's no slack and nothing's going to fall down and get caught up in anything. So once you get the second one done, go ahead and clip off the excess. And then, like I said, just work yourself all the way back. We won't bother with showing you all the boring details of how to zip tie this. All right, so as you can see, we've got our plugs here back by the bumper, ready to plug into our lights. So we'll plug one into the driver's side here and just push it in until it locks into place. And then once you've got that locked in, we'll take our zip tie and zip tie it to the existing harness. Cut off the excess. Now we can run our second wire for the passenger side up over our trailer hitch here. All right, so over our trailer hitch, we'll plug that into our second light, making sure it locks into place. Take another zip tie this up to the existing harness as well. Cut off our excess. And now we can go back up front and get everything hooked up as far as the power and the on-off switch. All right, now we're ready to run our on-off switch inside the cab. Now to do this, there's a grommet on the firewall here next to the power brake booster that what you can do is use a utility knife or a razor blade, something like that, cut a slice into this grommet, being careful, of course, not to damage the wiring harness that's already in there. And then you can feed this through, pull enough wire through to mount it where you want to mount it, and then use some silicone to go ahead and seal that back up. So since we're not making this a permanent addition to our vehicle, we're not actually going to cut the grommet. We're just going to move it out of the way and feed this in so you can see exactly where this needs to go. All right, so here's the grommet we were talking about. It's a pretty good sized grommet, so you shouldn't have any difficulty finding a spot that doesn't have any wires behind it. But like I said, since we're not going to be adding this permanently to our truck, we're just going to move this grommet out of the way, feed our switch through, and then once we've got it fed through, go ahead and pull enough of it through to be able to mount the switch where you want to mount it, and then we'll come back out and get everything hooked up power-wise. All right, now that we've got our switch run to the inside, what we can do is go ahead and hook up our power and our ground. Now we're going to do this by lifting up on the cover on this battery terminal over the positive side, and we're going to use one of the empty studs to be able to actually hook up our power wire. Now you will have to source an M6 by 1.0 nut to be able to secure this to the stud, or you can use one of the existing studs and just remove the nut there. So we'll just place this red wire over the stud, put a nut over the top to secure it, and then use our 10mm socket to tighten it down. And we go ahead and replace the cover on this, and then we're going to go ahead and connect our black ground wire to the negative terminal on the battery. Again, using our 10mm socket, we'll remove this nut, connect our ground cable, and replace the nut. Now we'll use our 10mm socket to tighten that down, make sure it's secure. All right, now that we've got our power and ground hooked up, we can go ahead and tuck these wires out of the way along with the relay, or you can find a place that you want to permanently mount it. So we're just going to tuck ours down here behind the fuse box, get it out of the way, and then we'll take the rest of our excess cord from our power switch and just wrap it up, put a zip tie around it, and tuck it in down here next to the power brake booster. All right, now that we've got our on-off switch fed through the firewall, we just reach up underneath the dash, pull enough wire through to be able to mount it where we want it to. And then what we're going to do is feed it up underneath the dash here, underneath the steering column, and we're going to mount it right here underneath the light switch. Now we'll go ahead and feed this power switch up underneath the dash, under the steering column, pull it through. And like I said, we're going to mount it right here underneath the headlight switch. So we're going to remove the backing material off of the switch and go ahead and just press it into position where we want it. Now you also need to make sure that you zip tie the cable underneath the dash, make sure it stays out of the way of any moving parts or any heat source that may be under there. Now that we've got power supplied to our switch and our lights, your installation is now complete. And that wraps up our review and install of the Barricade HD plate style full width rear bumper with LED fog lights for your 21 to current Bronco excluding Raptor. Thanks for watching, and remember, for all things Bronco, keep it right here at ExtremeTerrain.com.